Hi guys. Tonight we drift quietly into the secret warmth of a Viking longhouse. The air is sharp and tastes like metal. It is so cold that the hairs inside your nose freeze as you breathe. You can hear the snow crunching like dry sugar under your heavy boots. The wind pulls at your hood, trying to find any bit of bare skin to bite. All around you the world is white and blue, and the sun has been gone for a very long time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you want to let me know where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing those little snapshots of the world. Now dim the lights and let the story begin. You are walking through the deep snow of northern Norway. It is the middle of the night and the year is long ago. The sky above you is a very dark purple, nearly black, but it is filled with stars that look like tiny cold diamonds. Every breath you take comes out as a thick white cloud of mist. It hangs in the air for a moment before the wind whisks it away. Your feet feel heavy. You are wearing boots made of thick leather, tied tight with strings of hide. Inside the boots, your feet are wrapped in soft sheep's wool to keep your toes from turning to ice. You are wearing a very special kind of cloak. It is made of a heavy, rough wool called woodsmoke. This cloth is so thick that it can almost stand up on its own. It has been rubbed with oil and fat so that the wet snow just slides right off it. It smells a bit like a wet dog and a bit like old wood smoke, but it is the only thing keeping you alive out here in the dark. The weight of the cloak rests on your shoulders, pressing down on you like a warm blanket. You pull it closer around your neck, feeling the scratchy wool against your chin. The world is very quiet. Out here, far away from any town, there are no sounds except for the wind and the soft thud of your steps. You are looking for a place to rest. You are looking for the Borg Longhouse. It is a famous place even now. Scientists have found the old bones of this building and realized it was one of the biggest ever built. It is over 80 meters long. That is as long as a big ship or a whole row of modern houses. But in the dark, it does not look like a house. It looks like a giant animal sleeping under the snow. As you walk closer, you see a shape rising out of the white ground. It is long and low. The roof curves down toward the earth, looking like the bottom of the boat that has been turned upside down. This is the way the Vikings built their homes. They knew that a curved roof would help the wind slide over the top instead of pushing the house over. The roof is covered in thick layers of grass and turf. Right now, a heavy blanket of snow sits on top of it, making it look like a part of the hill itself. You stop for a moment. The silence here is deep. It is the kind of silence that feels heavy in your ears. You look up at the stars and realize how small you are in this big, frozen world. There are no streetlights here. There are no cars. There is only the ice, the wind, and the dark. This is the night shift of history. While the rest of the world is asleep in other lands, the people here are working to stay warm. They are fighting the cold every single minute. You see a small flicker of orange light. It is coming from a low door at the end of the long building. The light looks very small against the vast dark sky, but it draws you in. It looks like a warm eye watching you. You walk toward it, your boot sinking deep into the drifts. The snow is so high that it almost reaches the bottom of the roof. This is actually a good thing. The snow acts like a thick coat for the house. It keeps the warmth inside and stops the biting wind from getting through the cracks in the wood. As you get closer to the door, you notice the walls. They are not made of thin boards or bricks. They are made of massive logs and thick layers of earth. These walls are nearly 2 meters thick in some places. It is like a fortress made of dirt and timber. You reach out a hand, pulling it out from the warmth of your cloak for just a second. You touch the wall. The wood feels hard and rough. Even though it is freezing outside, the wood does not feel as cold as a stone would. It feels solid. It feels like it is holding a secret. The historical truth is that these houses were not just simple huts. People used to think they were primitive and dark, but we now know they were very clever. They were survival machines. They were built so well that even when it was 40 degrees below zero outside, it could be a cozy 20 degrees inside. That is a huge difference. They did this without any electricity or heaters. They used only the wood of the trees and the heat of the earth. You reach the door. It is made of thick oak, and it is very heavy. There is a small iron ring to pull. You can smell something now. It is a smell that means life. It is the smell of burning pine wood, dried fish, and the sweet scent of old hay. It is a rich, heavy smell that fills your nose and makes you feel hungry and tired all at once. You take one last look, at the cold blue world behind you. The wind gives one last howl, throwing a handful of dry snow against your back. You pull the iron ring. The door creaks on its big metal hinges. It is a slow, deep sound that echoes inside the hallway. As the door opens just a little bit, a wave of warmth hits your face. It feels like a physical thing, like a soft hand pressing against your skin. The air inside is thick and hazy with a little bit of smoke, but it feels wonderful. It is so much better than the freezing wind. You step inside and push the door shut behind you. You have to push hard because the door is heavy and fits very tightly into its frame. As the latch clicks into place, the sound of the wind vanishes. Suddenly, everything is quiet and still. The air here is still. The air here is still. It does not move. It feels heavy and safe. You are standing in a small entryway. It is dark here, but your eyes start to adjust. You take off your heavy wool cloak and shake the snow onto the floor. The snow does not melt right away, because the floor here is made of hard, packed dirt, but you can feel the warmth from the main room calling to you. You are no longer in the wild, cold night. You have entered the heart of the Viking world. This house was built to keep people alive when the world outside wanted to freeze them solid. It is a masterpiece of engineering, made by people who understood the trees and the wind better than almost anyone else in history. You stand there for a moment in the dim light, just breathing. You listen to the sound of your own heart slowing down. You are safe. You are warm. The long night is still outside, but inside, the fire is waiting. You are ready to see how this great wooden machine works. You are ready to see how a house can breathe and live just like a person. You take a step forward into the main hall, where the floor feels strangely warm beneath your boots. You move past the small entryway and step into the main part of the building. Your eyes are getting used to the dim light now. The main room is huge. It feels like being inside the belly of a giant wooden whale. The ceiling is very high up in the shadows, and the walls stretch out far into the dark. You reach out your hand again. This time, you touch one of the main logs that holds up the roof. It is a massive piece of pine. It is so wide that you could not put your arms all the way around it. As you run your fingers over the surface, the wood feels different than the wood you might find in a park or a garden today. It feels thick and a little bit waxy. This is because the Vikings were very clever about the trees they picked. They did not just cut down any tree they saw. They went deep into the dark forests to find trees that were very old and had grown very slowly in the cold. When a tree grows slowly, its wood becomes very dense and hard. This makes it a better wall to keep out the frost. It is like the tree spent its whole life getting ready to protect you from the winter. You notice a sticky feeling on your fingertips. This is the resin. Resin is like the thick golden blood of the tree. The Vikings liked trees with a lot of resin because it works like a natural glue and a shield. It keeps the water out and stops the wood from rotting in the damp autumn air. You put your nose close to the log. It smells sweet and sharp, like a fresh forest after a heavy rain. This smell is everywhere in the house. It is a clean, bright smell that makes the air feel fresh, even though there are no windows. There is a secret about these logs that most people do not know. Before they were put into this wall, they were treated with a special kind of magic, the magic of the ice. The builders took these resin-rich logs and put them into the freezing water of a lake during the winter. They let the logs sit there in the ice for a long time. This is called cold seasoning. It sounds strange to put wood in water to make it better, but it worked. The freezing water changed the tiny parts of the wood. It made the little cells inside the wood pull together very tightly. This made the wood even stronger. It made the material able to hold on to heat better than any stone or brick could ever do. You lean your shoulder against the log for a moment. It feels as solid as a mountain. It does not feel cold like the air outside. Wood is a wonderful thing because it does not like to let heat move through it. It wants to keep the warmth on one side and the cold on the other. In the middle of the winter, as the temperature drops lower and lower, these logs actually get better at their job. They shrink just a little bit, pulling toward each other and closing up any tiny gaps or holes. It is as if the whole house is hugging itself to stay warm. Underneath your heavy wool cloak, you are wearing a simple shirt made of linen. Linen comes from a plant called flax. It is a bit rough and scratchy, but it feels good against your skin now that you are out of the wind. You reach up to adjust your collar. You can feel the small, neat stitches that a woman made using a needle carved from a bird's bone. It took a long time to make this shirt. First, they had to grow the plants, then soak them, then beat them until they were soft threads, and finally weave them into cloth on a big wooden frame. Everything in this world takes time and a lot of hard work. Nothing is wasted, and everything is made to last. You walk a bit further along the wall. You see the marks left by the tools used by the builders. They used an axe and a special tool called a draw knife. A draw knife is a long, sharp blade with a handle at each end. The worker would sit on a bench and pull the blade toward them to shave off thin curls of wood until the log was smooth. You can see the little dips and ridges where the blade bit into the pine hundreds of years ago. It makes the wall look like a piece of art. It is not flat and boring like a modern wall made of plaster. It has a shape. It has a story you can feel with your hands. The house is very quiet here, away from the door. You stop and close your eyes. You listen. You do not hear the wind anymore. The thick walls have swallowed the sound of the storm. Instead, you hear the house itself. Every now and then, there is a soft creak or a tiny pop. That is the wood moving as it settles into the heavy snow. The house is breathing. It feels like the building is a giant, gentle animal that is watching over you while you stand in the dark. It is a very peaceful feeling. You feel like nothing bad can get to you through these thick pine walls. You think about the people who built this. They did not have big machines or computers or electricity. They only had their hands, their axes, and what they knew about the world around them. They knew which way the wind blew in the winter. They knew how to listen to the trees. They knew that if they built this house right, it would protect their children and their grandchildren for many years. It is a very strong way to build. They did not try to fight nature. Instead, they used the ice and the trees to make something that worked with the cold. The wall behind you is even thicker than it looks. On the outside of these logs, the Vikings piled up layers of turf and dirt. Turf is like a thick rug made of grass and roots. When you pile it up against the wood, it stops the wind from finding any little cracks. It is like the house is wearing a very thick sweater made of the ground itself. This is why it is so quiet and still in here. The earth and the wood work together to keep the world outside and the warmth inside. You look down at your hands. There is a little bit of that sticky resin on your thumb. You rub your fingers together. It feels tacky and strong. This resin is what helped the wood last for 1,000 years. Even now, in the year 2026, people go to museums to look at these structures. They are amazed that something made of wood could be so clever. They call it advanced engineering, but for the people living here, it was just the way you stayed alive. It was just home. You take a deep breath. The air is warmer here than it was by the door. You can feel the heat starting to seep into your bones. Your toes are starting to tingle as they wake up from the freezing cold. It is a good feeling. It is the feeling of being safe. You look ahead, deeper into the Longhouse. Far off in the center of the room you see the orange glow of a fire. It looks like a fallen star sitting on the floor. That is where you need to go. You want to be near the heart of the house, where the people gather to share the warmth. As you walk, you keep one hand on the wall. You follow the line of the locks. They guide you through the shadows. The wood feels friendly and familiar. It has been standing here, holding up the roof and keeping out the snow for a long time. It knows how to handle the winter. You feel like a guest in a very old, very wise place. The sticky pine, the heavy earth, and the clever way the logs were frozen in the lake all work together to make this space a sanctuary. You are moving slowly, taking your time. There is no rush in the middle of the night. The night shift is long, and the sun will not be back for many hours. You enjoy the feeling of the solid floor under your feet and the strong walls at your side. You are learning that the Vikings were not just sailors, they were masters of the forest. And this great wooden machine they built is the reason they could thrive in a land where the winter feels like it will never end. You leave the safety of the thick wooden wall and begin to walk toward the center of the Longhouse. The floor beneath your feet is interesting. It is not made of cold stone or modern boards. It is made of earth that has been packed down so hard that it feels almost like concrete. It is smooth and dry. As you move closer to the middle of the room, you notice something wonderful. The floor is getting warmer. You can feel the heat coming up through the soles of your leather boots. It feels like the ground itself is alive and glowing with a gentle warmth. In the very center of this giant room, you see the heart of the home. It is the hearth. A hearth is just a big, rectangular pit in the ground where the fire lives. It is lined with heavy grey stones that have been fitted together very carefully. These stones are not just there to look pretty. They have a very important job. During the day, when the fire is big and bright, these stones soak up all the heat. They grab the warmth from the flames and hold onto it tight. Think of these stones like a battery. A battery stores power so you can use it later. These rocks are thermal batteries. They store the heat of the fire. Now, in the middle of the night, the fire has burned down to a pile of glowing orange embers. The flames are small and quiet, but the stones are still radiating heat. They are pushing that stored warmth out into the air and up through the floor. This is why the room stays so cozy even when the fire is low. Even if the fire went out completely, these big stones would stay warm for hours and hours, keeping the frost away from your bed. You find a low wooden bench near the hearth and sit down. The wood of the bench is smooth and worn from many people sitting on it over many years. You lean forward and hold your hands out toward the glowing coals. The warmth feels like a soft, invisible blanket wrapping around your fingers. Your skin, which was so cold and tight from the wind outside, begins to relax. You can feel your pulse slowing down. Your breathing becomes deep and steady. Next to the hearth you see a specific tool. It is a long iron rod with a small hook on the end, used for moving the heavy logs. Beside it sits a small bowl made of soapstone. Soapstone is a very special kind of rock. It is soft enough that you can carve it with a knife, but it is very good at holding heat. This bowl was sitting near the fire, and inside is a little bit of thick porridge made from oats and honey. You pick up a spoon carved from a piece of dark wood. The spoon feels light in your hand. You take a small bite of the porridge. It is still warm, and it tastes of the earth and the fields. It is a simple meal, but here in the quiet night, it feels like a feast. The light from the embers is soft and orange. It does not reach all the way to the corners of the room, but it casts long, dancing shadows on the high ceiling. You look up and see the big beams of wood that hold up the roof. They are covered in a thin layer of shiny black soot from the smoke. This soot from the smoke. It works like a layer of paint that protects the wood from bugs and rot. The smoke rises in a straight, thin line from the hearth, drifting up toward a small opening in the roof. You stay very still. This is the quietest time of the night. There is no one else awake in this part of the Longhouse. You listen to the sound of the fire. It does not roar like a big bonfire. Instead, it makes tiny, rhythmic sounds. You hear a soft click as a piece of charcoal breaks apart. You hear a faint hiss as a tiny drop of moisture inside a log turns to steam. These are the sounds of a house that is resting. It is a very peaceful, lonely sound, but you do not feel sad. You feel like you are being looked after. The Vikings had a lot of respect for the fire. They knew that without it, they would not survive the winter. They often thought of the fire as a living thing that stayed in the house with them. Some people called it the house spirit. They made sure that someone was always nearby to watch it, even in the deepest part of the night. That is your job right now. You are the watcher of the light. You are the one who makes sure the battery stays charged so the family can wake up in a warm room. You look at the stones of the hearth again. They are dusty and have little bits of white ash on them. You can see where the heat has made tiny cracks in some of the rocks over many years. Each crack tells a story of 1,000 fires. It tells a story of cold nights just like this one, where the wind screamed outside, but the people inside were safe. You reach out and carefully touch the very edge of one of the stones. It is not so hot that it burns you, but it feels like a very warm loaf of bread, fresh from the oven. The engineering of this hearth is amazing. Modern people who study old buildings are surprised at how clever the Vikings were. They did not just throw some wood on the ground. They built a system. They knew that by putting the fire in the middle of the room, the heat would spread out evenly in every direction. They knew that the smoke would rise and create a layer of warm air near the ceiling, which acted like a second blanket over the whole house. Every part of the fire was used for something good. You lean back on the bench and close your eyes for a moment. The silence of the Longhouse is like a deep pool of water. It is heavy and still. You can hear the distant sound of the snow hitting the roof, a soft shh sound like someone whispering. But in here, by the stones, the air is still. It is the perfect temperature. It is not too hot, and it is certainly not cold. It is just right. You feel the weight of your own body on the bench. You feel the warmth of the porridge in your belly. Everything in this world is made of basic things: stone, wood, iron, and fire. There are no plastics here. There are no humming machines or buzzing lights. Because of that, your senses feel sharper. You can feel the texture of the air. You can hear the smallest movements. You feel more connected to the world around you. You are part of the night shift, the guardian of the warmth. You are the bridge between the cold stars outside and the sleeping people in the shadows. You pick up the iron rod and gently poke at one of the glowing coals. A few tiny sparks fly up into the air, dancing like orange fireflies before disappearing into the dark. You push a small piece of wood closer to the center to make sure it catches the heat. The glow gets a little bit brighter, painting the floor and your boots in a rich golden color. You feel a sense of pride. You are keeping the heart at the home beating. The Longhouse is a survival machine, and the hearth is the engine that makes it run. Without these stones, the wood and the turf would just be a cold box. But with the fire and the clever battery rocks, it becomes a place where life can continue even when the sun hides for months at a time. You sit back, watching the embers pulse with light, and you let the deep, warm silence of the night wrap around you like a dream. You stay on the low wooden bench for a long time. Now that your body is warm, your other senses begin to wake up. In the dark, when you cannot see very far, your nose becomes your guide. The air in this longhouse is thick and heavy, but it is not bad. It is a rich, complicated smell that tells the story of everything that happens inside these walls. It is the smell of a family living through the long, dark months of the northern winter. The first thing you notice is the smoke. It is not the sharp, stinging smoke of a forest fire that makes your eyes water. Because the wood was seasoned in the ice and dried so carefully, the smoke is thin and blue. It smells like the deep woods. It has a sweet, resinous scent like pine needles and sap. This smoke does not stay low where you are sitting. It rises slowly, drifting up toward the high roof. It forms a thin grey veil above your head. This layer of smoke is actually a good thing. It acts like a lid on a pot, keeping the warmest air from escaping too quickly through the roof. You look up into the shadows of the rafters. Hanging from the big wooden beams are hundreds of small, dark bundles. They look like tiny, sleeping birds or brown skeletons hanging in the dark. These are the dried plants and herbs that the people gathered during the short, bright summer. They are tied together with bits of rough hemp string. As the warm air from the fire rises, it moves through these bundles, shaking loose their scents and mixing them with the smell of the pine smoke. You stand up slowly and walk toward the edge of the room where the walls meet the roof. You reach up and touch one of the bundles. The leaves are dry and brittle. They feel like thin paper between your thumb and finger. This is a bunch of meadowsweet. In the summer, this plant has fluffy white flowers that smell like honey and almonds. Even now, in the middle of the winter, it still carries that sweet, sunny smell. The Vikings hung meadowsweet in their homes because it made the air feel light and happy. It was like keeping a little piece of the summer sun inside a jar. Right next to the meadowsweet is another plant called mugwort. This is a very special plant for the night shift. It has dark green leaves with silver furs on the bottom. The Vikings believed that mugwort could protect you and help you have clear, meaningful dreams. It has a sharp, spicy smell, a bit like sage or peppermint. You take a deep breath, pulling the scent of the mugwort deep into your lungs. It feels cool and tingly in your chest. They used this plant for many things. They put it in their beer, they used it as medicine for tired legs, and they hung it from the ceiling to keep the air smelling fresh when the doors were shut tight against the snow. The historical truth is that life inside a longhouse was very crowded. In a place like the Borg Longhouse, there might be 40 or 50 people living together, along with their dogs, and even some of their farm animals. When so many living things are in one room for months, the air can get very stale. The Vikings were very clever about this. They did not just use the plants for medicine, they used them as a natural air freshener. By hanging these herbs near the rising smoke, they created a system that cleaned the air and made it smell like a garden instead of a crowded barn. You move your hand to a different bundle. This one is smaller and tied very tightly. You pull it a little closer to your nose. This is wild thyme. It smells earthy and warm. The people would take a few leaves of this and drop them into the cooking pot to make the meat taste better. Or, if someone had a cough from the cold, damp air, they would soak these leaves in hot water to make a tea. You can feel the history in these plants. They were the pharmacy and the grocery store of the Viking world, all hanging within reach of the fire. You walk back toward the hearth and sit down again. You close your eyes and just breathe. You try to pick out all the different layers of the scent. Underneath the sweet meadowsweet and the spicy mugwort, there are deeper smells. You can smell the salt from the dried fish hanging in the back of the room. You can smell the rich, fatty scent of the woolen blankets and the leather boots. You can even smell the earth of the floor, which has a damp, clean odor like a fresh garden. This is a moment of deep reflection. You realize that even though the world outside is frozen and dead, this house is full of the smells of life. Each bundle of plants is a memory of a walk in the woods or a day spent in the fields under the sun. The smell of the smoke is the smell of the forest giving up its warmth to keep you alive. It is a very safe and comforting mix of scents. It reminds you that you are part of a cycle. The plants grow in the sun, they are gathered in the autumn, and they give their scent and their medicine in the winter to help the people see the spring again. You stay very still, letting the heavy air wrap around you. The silence is so deep that you can almost hear the plants rustling in the warm breeze from the fire. It is a soft, papery sound. In the modern world, we use sprays and chemicals to make our houses smell clean, but those smells are often sharp and fake. Here, everything is real. Everything comes from the ground or the trees. It feels honest. It feels like the house is telling you that everything you need to survive is already here, if you only know how to find it and keep it. You look at a small wooden bowl sitting on the floor near your feet. It is filled with dried juniper berries. They are small dark purple spheres that look like tiny pebbles. You pick one up and crush it between your fingernails. A sudden burst of bright gin-like scent fills the air around you. It is a very cold smell like the mountain air. The Vikings would sometimes throw these berries onto the fire to create a big cloud of fragrant smoke. They believed it would drive away bad spirits and keep the house healthy. You drop the crushed berry onto the glowing embers. A tiny puff of white smoke rises up. For a second, the smell of the juniper is the strongest thing in the room. It cuts through the sweetness of the honey and the heaviness of the wool. It makes you feel alert and awake for a moment, even in your tiredness. You watch the little puff of smoke join the great blue river of air moving toward the roof. You feel a sense of peace. The night shift is not just about staying awake, it is about tending to the life of the home. By keeping the fire going and the air smelling sweet, you are making a world where the people can rest and grow strong for the morning. You lean your head back against the post. The scent of the night is a blanket for your mind. It is the smell of survival, made of wood, leaf, and fire. You let your eyes drift shut, listening to the tiny whispers of the drying herbs as they sway in the warmth. You are safe in the heart of the survival machine, and the air you breathe is a gift from the summer, held tight in the arms of the winter house. You turn your attention back to the massive logs that form the walls around you. In the orange light of the fire, you can see the grain of the wood. The grain is the pattern of lines that shows how the tree grew. On these logs, the lines are very close together. They are so tight that they look like the pages of a very thick book. This tells you that these trees lived a very hard, very slow life. They did not grow in a sunny meadow with plenty of water. They grew on the side of a cold, windy mountain where they had to fight for every inch of height. To build a house like this, a survival machine, you cannot just go into the woods and chop down the first tree you see. The Vikings were masters of the forest. They knew that the wood was the most important part of their world. Long before the house was built, perhaps even 20 years before, a builder would walk through the deep, dark forest. He would look for specific pine trees. He was looking for trees that were malmfuru. This is an old word for wood that is full of resin and heartwood. Imagine a man walking through the snow in the autumn. He is wearing a heavy tunic of blue wool and thick trousers. On his belt, he carries a small, sharp tool called a marking axe. It is smaller than a regular axe with a blade shaped like a half moon. When he finds a tree that looks strong and old, he does something that seems strange. He uses his marking axe to cut a long strip of bark off the side of the tree, starting from the bottom and going up a few feet. He does not cut deep enough to kill the tree. He only wounds it. As you sit by the fire, you can almost see that tree in your mind. When the tree is wounded, it tries to heal itself. It sends all its thick, sticky resin down to the cut to seal the wound. It is like the trees bleeding thick, golden honey. Over many years, the builder comes back and cuts another strip. Each time he does this, the tree sends more resin into the wood. The inside of the tree becomes soaked in this natural oil. By the time the builder finally cuts the tree down, the wood is not just wood anymore. It is like a piece of plastic or stone. It is so full of resin that it will never rot, and bugs will not eat it. This is a very important historical fact. The Vikings chose these resin-rich trees because they had a higher thermal resistance. That is a big way of saying that the wood was very good at stopping the cold from passing through. Because the wood was so dense and oily, it could hold on to heat much better than the fast wood we use to build houses today. A tree that grows quickly in a warm place is full of air and soft bits, but a tree that grows slowly in the cold and is filled with resin by a clever builder is a perfect shield against the winter. You reach out and touch a spot on the log where a knot is visible. A knot is a hard, dark circle where a branch once grew. It feels as smooth as a piece of glass. You can feel the strength of it. You think about the patience of the people who built this. They didn't want a house that would only last for 10 years. They were thinking about 100 years. They were thinking about their great-grandchildren sitting exactly where you are sitting now, safe and dry while the snow piles up outside. There is a deep silence in the room as you think about this. You can almost feel the weight of the time it took to make this wall. It is not just a wall, it is a collection of lives. Each log lived for 200 years in the forest, and then it was prepared for 20 years by a man with a marking axe. Now, it has been part of this house for a long time. The house is a slow thing. It does not hurry. It sits in the snow, heavy and solid, holding all that history inside its grain. In the modern world, we want everything to be fast. We want houses built in a few weeks. But the Vikings knew that nature cannot be rushed. If you want a house that can fight the night shift of the northern winter, you have to work at the speed of a tree. You have to wait for the resin to flow. You have to wait for the ice to season the timber. You have to listen to what the forest is telling you. You look down at your belt. You see a small leather pouch. Inside it you have a small piece of dried resin that you picked up earlier. It is hard and yellow, like a piece of amber. You hold it between your thumb and finger. It is light, but it feels powerful. This tiny piece of tree blood is the secret to why this whole building works. It is the glue that holds the heat in and keeps the cold out. Without it, the logs would crack and the wind would whistle through the gaps. You lean your head back against the massive post. You can feel the vibration of the wind hitting the outside of the house, but it feels very far away. The log behind you is so thick and so full of oil that the wind cannot get through. It is a very comforting thought. You are being protected by the choices of a man who walked through the woods a long, long time ago. He saw this tree, he marked it with his axe, and he knew that one day someone would need its warmth. The light from the hearth flickers, making the grain of the wood look like it is moving. It looks like a slow golden river. You feel a deep respect for the trees. They are the silent partners of the Viking people. They provide the ships to cross the sea and the houses to survive the land. And here, in the middle of the night, you are the one who gets to enjoy the result of all that slow, careful work. You take a deep breath of the pine-scented air. It feels thick and healthy in your throat. You are learning that every part of this survival machine was planned. Nothing was an accident. The thickness of the walls, the type of the wood, and the way the trees were treated were all part of a master plan to beat the winter. You feel very small compared to the ancient trees and the old wisdom of the builders, but you also feel very cared for. You are a guest in a house that was built to last forever. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the thermal battery stones and the protection of the resin-rich logs settle over you. The longhouse is quiet. The fire is low. The walls are working. Even while everyone sleeps, the wood is holding back the ice. The night shift continues, and you are safe in the arms of the forest. You stay there, listening to the soft heart of the house, feeling the history in the wood against your back. You sit back on the bench, the warmth of the hearth still soaking into your legs. You look at the massive logs in the wall again. You are thinking about how these trees became so strong. You close your eyes and let your mind travel back in time, away from the warm fire and out into the deep frozen woods. You imagine the world where these logs were born. It is a place where the air is so cold it feels like a physical weight against your chest. In your mind, you are standing on the edge of a great lake. The water is frozen solid. The ice is thick and blue, looking like a giant sheet of glass that has been pulled across the valley. The mountains around the lake are white and sharp. You can hear the ice groaning and cracking as it shifts. It is a deep, booming sound that travels for miles. It sounds like a giant waking up from a long sleep. You see a group of men working on the ice. They are dressed in layers of heavy woolen fur. One man is kneeling on the frozen surface. He is using a special tool called an auger. An auger is like a giant metal screw with a wooden handle at the top. He turns it slowly, and the sharp metal bite of the tool chews through the ice, throwing out white chips that look like salt. He is making holes in the lake. You look down at your own feet in this memory. To keep from slipping on the slick blue ice, you are wearing something called brodder. These are small iron spikes that are tied to the bottom of your leather boots with thin strips of hide. Every time you take a step, the metal spikes bite into the ice with a sharp clack. This micro-history detail is very important. Without these little spikes, a man could fall and break a bone, and in this cold world, a broken bone is very dangerous. The brodder keep you safe. They give you a firm grip on the frozen world. The men have brought the resin-rich logs down from the forest using sledges pulled by strong hairy horses. Now, they are pushing the logs into the holes in the ice. They want the wood to sink down into the freezing water. This is the cold seasoning process. It seems very strange to put wood into a lake to make it better for a house, but this is one of the cleverest things the Vikings ever did. The historical fact is that this bath in the ice water changes the wood forever. Inside every piece of wood, there are millions of tiny cells. Usually, these cells are like little open boxes, but when the wood stays in the freezing water for a whole winter, something happens. The extreme cold makes those little boxes pull together. They shrink and get very tight. It is like the wood is clenching its teeth against the cold. This makes the timber much more efficient at holding onto heat. Scientists today call this thermal resistance, but for the Vikings, it was just the way you made wood winter-ready. You watch as a log disappears beneath the surface of the dark water. For a moment you see bubbles of air trapped under the ice. They look like silver coins floating in the dark. Then, everything becomes still. This is the moment of reflection. You stand on the ice and look down into the deep, black water. You think about the logs resting down there in the dark and the cold. They are not rotting. They are getting stronger. They are learning how to live with the ice. The silence on the lake is different from the silence in the house. It is a cold, empty silence. You can feel the wind moving across the flat ice, but there is nothing for it to hit, so it makes no sound. It is just a cold pressure against your face. You stay there for a long time, watching the silver bubbles and the dark shapes of the timber. You feel a deep sense of calm. You realize that to build something that lasts, you have to be willing to let it sit in the dark for a while. You have to let it grow strong in the cold. When the spring comes and the ice finally melts, the men will come back to the lake. They will pull the logs out of the water. The wood will be heavy and wet, but it will be different. It will be harder and denser. They will then stack the logs in the wind for another year to let them dry slowly. By the time that wood is used to build the walls of the Borg Museum or a great Longhouse, it is no longer just a tree. It is a survival material. You open your eyes and find yourself back in the warm room. You reach out and touch the log behind your bench. You know now that this wood spent a whole winter under the ice. You can almost feel the coldness of the lake hidden deep inside the timber, but it is not coming out. The log is keeping the cold trapped inside its tight cells so that the warmth of the fire can stay with you. It is a very strange and beautiful thought. The wood went into the ice so that you would not have to. The smell of the fire is stronger now. You see a small pot sitting on a flat stone near the edge of the hearth. Inside, a bit of fat is melting, and it sizzles softly. This is the sound of the house taking care of you. Everything in here has a purpose. The walls were frozen to make them warm. The roof was built to breathe. The floor was packed to hold the heat. It is a world where every detail was thought about 1,000 years ago. You adjust your position on the bench. Your back is against the log that was once under the ice. It feels very solid. It does not give or bend. It is like leaning against the side of a ship. You think about the men with their iron spikes on their boots, working in the freezing wind. They did all that hard work so that you could sit here tonight in the dark. They fought the ice so that you could have a home. You feel a deep gratitude for the brodder and the auger and the cold lake. They are the tools and the places that made this warmth possible. You take a slow, deep breath. The air is sweet with the scent of dried meadowsweet and pine. You are safe. You are part of the night shift, but you are not alone. You have the trees and the memories of the lake to keep you company. The fire pulses again, a soft beat of orange light. The shadows of the rafters move gently across the ceiling. You listen to the silence of the house. It is a full silence, filled with the presence of the wood and the stone. You are learning the language of the Longhouse. It is a language of slow growth, cold water, and steady heat. You close your eyes again, feeling the strength of the ice-seasoned timber supporting your weight. You are a guest in a masterpiece of the old world, and the night is your friend. You remain still, leaning against the great log. There is something you notice now that the room has become even quieter. It is a very small sound, almost like a tiny finger scratching against the wood. You look closely at the gap between two of the massive logs. When you first sat down, there was a tiny sliver of a gap where you could see a hint of the dark night outside. But now, as the temperature outside drops even lower, that gap is gone. The logs have moved. This is the magic of the survival machine at work. Usually, when things get cold, they get brittle and break. But these logs are different. Because of that cold seasoning in the lake and the way they are full of resin, the wood reacts to the freezing air in a very clever way. As the air outside turns to ice, the cells inside the timber contract. They pull toward each other. This makes each log press harder against the one above it and the one below it. The colder it gets outside, the tighter the house becomes. It is as if the building is pulling its cloak tight around its shoulders to keep out the draft. You reach out and run your hand over the joint where two logs meet. It feels as smooth as a single piece of wood. You cannot even find the place where the wind might have tried to get in. The Vikings did not use nails or glue to hold these walls together. They used the weight of the wood and the shape of the joints. They carved notches into the ends of the logs. A notch is a V-shaped cut that lets one log sit perfectly inside another. It is like the way you might lock your fingers together to make a strong grip. Inside that joint, the builders tucked a little bit of help. You see a tiny tuft of something green and soft sticking out of a seam. You reach out and pull a tiny bit of it away. This is dried moss. In the summer, the children would go into the damp parts of the forest to gather large baskets of this thick emerald green moss. They would dry it in the sun until it was springy and tough. When the house was being built, the men laid thick ribbons of this moss between every log. This moss is a very important tool. It acts like a soft cushion. When the logs move and tighten in the winter, the moss is squeezed flat. It fills up every tiny bump and hole in the wood. It is the perfect seal. It stops the wind, but it also lets the house breathe just a little bit so the air doesn't get wet and rot the timber. You hold the bit of moss between your fingers. Even though it is hundreds of years old, it still feels a bit like wool. It is a tiny piece of the forest floor hidden here in the wall to keep you warm. You think about how much sense this makes. In the modern world, we use foam and plastic to seal our houses, but those things stay the same size all the time. If the house moves, the plastic cracks and the cold gets in. But here, the wood and the moss are alive in their own way. They move with the weather. They work with the frost. It is a building that knows how to fight back against the storm. You look at your own clothing again. You are wearing a pair of thick woolen mittens. They are not like modern gloves with 5 fingers. They have one big space for your fingers and one for your thumb. This is called nail binding. It is a very old way of making clothes using a single large needle made of bone or wood. Unlike knitting, which uses 2 needles, nail binding creates a fabric that is very strong and will not unravel if it gets a hole. Your mittens are thick and a bit fuzzy. They had been felted, which means they were washed in hot water and beaten until the wool fibers locked together. You take one mitten off and feel the warmth of your hand. The wool is so thick that even if it got wet, it would still keep you warm. That is the secret of the night shift. Everything you wear and everything you live inside is designed to handle the worst that nature can throw at you. You are wrapped in layers of protection. The linen on your skin, the wool on your body, the moss in the walls, and the resin in the logs. You are the heart of a giant wooden onion, protected by layer after layer of clever engineering. The silence of the house is broken by a soft thud from above. It is a heavy pile of snow sliding off the curve of the roof and hitting the ground outside. It sounds like a muffled drumbeat. But inside, nothing shakes. The walls are too heavy and too tight to care about the snow. You feel a deep sense of security. You know that even if the world outside was buried under 10 feet of white powder, you would still be sitting here by the warm stones, breathing the scent of pine and meadowsweet. You look at the hearth again. The orange glow reflects in the smooth, tight joints of the logs. It looks beautiful. There is a pattern to the way the logs are stacked. It looks like the rhythm of a song. You can see the work of the axes and the care of the hands that placed each piece of timber. They knew that a small mistake in the autumn would mean a cold wind in the winter, so they made no mistakes. They fitted the wood so tightly that even the smallest ghost of a draft could not find its way in. This is a moment of reflection. You think about how we often think of the past as a rough or hard time, and it was hard. But it was also very smart. These people understood the materials of their world better than we understand the materials of ours. They knew exactly how much a pine log would shrink. They knew exactly how much moss to use. They turned a pile of trees into a machine that creates warmth out of nothing but a few sparks and a lot of clever thinking. You lean your head back and look up at the dark rafters. The smoke is still moving in its slow blue river toward the roof. The air is still. You do not feel even the tiniest puff of wind against your cheek. The house has successfully shut out the entire world. You are in a secret place, a wooden bubble of heat in a universe of ice. You feel your eyelids getting heavy. The night shift is a quiet one tonight. The house is doing all the work for you. You put your woolen mitten back on. The scratchy warmth feels good. You look at the tiny tuft of moss in the wall one last time. It is such a small thing, but without it, the house would be a cold and miserable place. It reminds you that in a big system like this, survival machine, the small things matter just as much as the big things. The moss is just as important as the giant logs. The tiny sparks are just as important as the big fire. You close your eyes and listen to the house tighten. You can hear the wood settling. A very low and deep sound, like a giant sighing in its sleep. The logs are pressing closer. The seals are closing. The warmth is staying exactly where it belongs, right here with you. You feel the peace of a job well done. Even though the builders have been gone for 1,000 years, their work is still holding. Their machine is still running. And you are safe in its heart. You decide to stand up and walk a few paces away from the hearth. As you move toward the darker parts of the long hall, you notice something that feels almost like magic. Even though you are moving away from the glowing orange coals of the fire, your feet do not get cold. In fact, as you step onto a specific area of the hard-packed dirt floor, a fresh wave of heat rises up through the soles of your leather boots. It feels as if the very ground beneath you is a warm stove. This is not magic, but another part of the Viking survival machine. Beneath the floor you are standing on, there is a hidden network of paths. Modern scientists, using tools like ground-penetrating radar, which is a way of seeing through the earth without digging, have found these secret tunnels. These are subfloor networks for radiant heating. Radiant heating is a fancy name for heat that moves through a solid object, like the floor, to warm the room. The Vikings built these tunnels using flat stones to create long, hollow spaces that run from the central fire pit out toward the edges of the room. Imagine the builders many years ago. They dug deep trenches into the earth before the house was even finished. They lined these trenches with heavy stones and then covered them with more flat rocks and a thick layer of clay and dirt. These tunnels act like veins in a body, carrying the hot air and smoke from the main fire to the far corners of the building. As the hot air travels through these stone pipes, it heats up the rocks and the dirt above them. This turns the entire floor into a giant heater that stays warm all through the night. You walk slowly, feeling for the warm spots. It is a strange and wonderful feeling to be in a dark, ancient building and feel modern comfort under your feet. You look down at your boots. They are made of goat leather, and the soles are thin enough that you can feel every change in temperature. You find a particularly warm patch and stand there for a moment. You can feel the heat soaking into your wool-wrapped feet, moving up your ankles and into your legs. It makes your whole body feel heavy and relaxed. In your hand you are carrying a small tool that you picked up from a wooden chest near the wall. It is a lucette. A lucette is a small two-pronged tool made of polished ampler that looks a bit like a tiny tuning fork or a wooden Y. It is used for making strong square cords out of wool thread. You run your thumb over the smooth surface of the antler. It feels cool and waxy. This little tool is a microhistory of the night shift. While sitting by the fire in the dark, a person would use the lucette to braid cords for their clothes or for tying up bundles of dried fish. It is a quiet, rhythmic job that you can do mostly by touch, letting your mind wander while your fingers stay busy. The room is so still that you can hear the faint, muffled sound of the air moving through the tunnels beneath you. It is a low, hushing sound, like the earth is taking a long, slow breath. This system is incredibly clever because it uses the waste heat from the fire. Instead of letting all the warmth go straight up through the hole in the roof, the Vikings forced some of it to travel sideways under their feet. This saved a huge amount of wood. They could stay warm using much less fuel than people in other parts of the world who lived in stone castles or drafty huts. You think about the reflection of the fire on the walls, the orange light dances on the logs, but the heat from the floor is steady and invisible. It is a secret warmth. You feel a deep respect for the people who thought to dig these paths. They knew that the cold comes from the ground just as much as it comes from the wind. By warming the floor, they made sure that the night shift was not a time of suffering, but a time of rest. You could lay a blanket directly on this dirt floor and sleep as soundly as if you were in a warm bed. The historical truth is that these subfloor systems were centuries ahead of their time. For a long time, people thought the Vikings were just rough warriors, but these tunnels prove they were master engineers. They understood how air moves and how stones hold on to heat. They built a house that worked like a living organism, with a heart in the middle and veins of heat running through its limbs. It is a very peaceful thought to know that even the dirt under your feet is working to keep you safe. You walk back toward the hearth, following the path of the warmth. You feel like you're walking on the back of a large, sleeping creature that is keeping you out of the snow. The silence of the night is your companion. You stop and look at the smoke rising from the fire. Most of it goes up, but you know that some of it is being pulled down into the stones, snaking its way under the floor to keep the corners of the house from freezing. It is a perfect circle of energy. You sit down again, feeling the warmth of the floor through your boots and the warmth of the hearth on your face. You are surrounded by heat from all sides. The survival machine is running perfectly. You take a deep breath and the air feels clear and good. You are no longer just a person in a house. You are part of a system that has been perfected over hundreds of years. You let your hands rest on your knees, feeling the solid warm earth beneath you. The long night continues, but here in the Baldrong Hall, the ground itself is a promise that the morning will come, and you will be warm when it does. You lean forward and reach out your hand toward the stones that line the fire pit. You do not touch the ones closest to the glowing coals, as they are far too hot, but you rest your palm on a large, flat grey stone near the outer edge. It feels wonderful. It is a deep, solid heat that seems to sink right through your skin and into your bones. This stone is a thermal battery. It has been soaking up the energy of the fire all evening, and now it is slowly giving that energy back to the room. The Vikings were very particular about the stones they used for their hearths. They did not just grab any rock from the field. They looked for stones like basalts or granite rocks that are very heavy and dense. A heavy stone is better at holding heat than a light, porous one. If you use a light stone, it heats up fast but cools down just as quickly. But these big, heavy rocks are slow. They take a long time to get hot, and they take an even longer time to get cold. This is the secret to surviving the night shift. When the fire burns down to small embers at 3 o'clock in the morning, these stones are still as warm as a fresh loaf of bread. You notice a small, flat stone sitting right on the edge of the heat. On top of it sits a scalm. This is a small, simple lamp made of a hollowed-out stone. Inside the hollow is a pool of rendered seal fat or fish oil. A small wick made of twisted moss or dried pith from a rush plant floats in the oil. The flame is tiny and yellow, casting a soft flickering light that smells a bit like cooked fish. It is not a bright light, but it is enough to see the path to your bed. You pick up a small wooden stick and gently trim the wick to keep the flame steady. This little lamp is another part of the thermal system. Because it sits on the warm hearthstone, the oil inside stays liquid and easy to burn. If it were sitting on a cold table in the corner, the fat might get thick and hard, making the lamp go out. Everything in this house works together. The big stones keep the house warm, and the heat from the stones keeps the lamps burning and the food ready. It is a world where nothing is wasted, not even a tiny bit of warmth from a dying fire. You sit in silence for a moment, watching the tiny flame of the stone lamp dance. The reflection of the fire is caught in the smooth surface of the stones. These rocks have been heated and cooled thousands of times. If you look closely, you can see tiny sparkles in the granite. Those are crystals of quartz and mica. They catch the light like hidden jewels. It makes the hearth look like something magical, even though it is just a very clever piece of engineering. The historical fact is that the hearth was the most important part of the house. It was the center of the world for a Viking family. In some old stories, people said that as long as the stones at the hearth were warm, the family was safe. If the hearth went cold, it meant the house was dead. That is why someone always stays awake or sleeps lightly near the fire. You are the guardian of that warmth tonight. You are making sure the battery stays charged so that the children sleeping in the side beds don't feel the frost on their blankets. You pull your feet back a little bit, even through your boots. The floor near the stones is very hot. You think about the people who sat here before you. They would have used these stones to dry their wet socks after a day in the snow. They would have set their wooden dough bowls here to help the bread rise. The hearth was not just for heat, it was a tool for every part of life. It was a clothes dryer, an oven, a furnace, and a light source all in one. This is a moment of reflection. You think about how quiet the stones are. They don't make any noise, unlike the crackling wood. They just sit there, heavy and silent, doing their job. In our modern world, we have heaters that hum and beep and blow air, but this thermal battery is silent. It is a peaceful way to stay warm. It doesn't disturb your sleep. It just hums with heat that you can feel but not hear. You reach for a small iron poker and gently move a glowing coal away from the edge. The heat hits your face in a sudden wave. It makes your cheeks feel tight. You look at the way the stones fit together. There is no mortar or cement holding them. They are just held by their own weight and the way they were carved to fit. It is a very honest way to build. If a stone cracks from the heat, you can simply lift it out and put a new one in. You lean back and let the warmth of the battery wash over you. The longhouse is full of shadows, but the area around the hearth feels like a golden island in a dark sea. You feel a deep sense of calm. The wind is still howling outside, trying to find a way in, but it cannot get past the thick walls or the heavy, warm stones. You are safe in the survival machine. You are the watcher of the light and the keeper of the heat. The small stone lamp flickers once, then settles back into a steady glow. The air is still, the house is warm. You stay there, your hand resting near the ancient heated granite, feeling the pulse of the fire as it sleeps within the rock. You are learning that the strongest things in the world are often the simplest stone, fire, and the wisdom to put them together. You look up from the warm glow of the hearth and peer into the high dark spaces near the roof. Even though the fire is burning, the air around you feels fresh and clean. You do not cough, and your eyes do not sting from the smoke. This is because of another brilliant part of the Viking survival machine. High above your head, where the shadows are deepest, the roof is doing something very special. It is breathing. The Vikings built autonomous ventilation systems, which is a fancy way of saying a roof that can think for itself. They didn't have fans or buttons to push. Instead, they used the way air moves on its own. They placed small, clever vents in the roof structure. These vents were designed to open and close based on the pressure of the air and the temperature inside. When the house gets too warm or the smoke gets too thick, the air pressure changes, and these wooden vents allow the old air to slip out while keeping the heat in. You can see one of these vents now. It looks like a small wooden flap or a shingle that sits at a different angle than the others. As a gust of wind hits the outside of the house, you see the flap move just a tiny bit, like the gill of a fish. It lets out a puff of blue smoke and then settles back down to create a tight seal. This prevents a dangerous gas called carbon monoxide from building up. Carbon monoxide is an invisible bad air that can happen when fires burn enclosed spaces, but in this house, the engineering makes sure the air is always safe for the people sleeping below. Near the post where you are standing, you see a small wooden box attached to a beam. Inside the box is a specific tool called a weather vane or a wind teller. It is a small carved piece of wood that hangs on a piece of horsehair string. When the air pressure in the house changes, the wood twists slightly. By looking at which way the wood is turning, the night watchman would know if they needed to adjust the vents or the fire. It is a tiny bit of microhistory that shows how much the Vikings cared about the health of their indoor air. The historical fact is that these systems were so good that they regulated humidity, which is how much water is in the air. If a house is too damp, the wood rots and people get sick. If it is too dry, the wood cracks. The Viking longhouse kept the air at the perfect level, almost like a modern HVAC system. It is incredible to think that they achieved this using only wood, wind, and gravity. They understood that a house should not be a sealed box, but a living thing that exchanges air with the world outside in a controlled way. You stand very still and listen. You can hear the faint whistle of the air moving through the roof vents. It is a very high, thin sound, like a bird singing far away. But down here, where you are, the air is perfectly still. The system is designed so that the movement of air happens high up, far above the beds. This keeps the thermal zones separate. The warm, heavy air stays down with the people, while the smoky, thin air stays up in the rafters until it is breathed out by the roof. You feel a sense of wonder. You are inside a building that is watching over you. It is checking the air, moving its vents, and keeping the smoke away while you rest. It is a very peaceful reflection. You realize that you don't have to worry about anything. The builders who lived 1,000 years ago have already solved every problem. They made sure that even in the deepest winter, the air would be sweet and the fire would be safe. You reach out and touch the main support post. You can feel a very slight vibration from the wind, but the air around your hand is warm. You look at the wind tiller hanging on its string. It is perfectly still right now, which means the house is in balance. The pressure is just right. The survival machine is humming along quietly in the dark. You are the only one awake to see it work, and it feels like a secret gift. As you stand there, you think about how lucky you are. Outside, the world is frozen and the air is thin and biting. But in here, the air is rich with the smell of pine and the warmth of the earth. You take a deep, slow breath. It feels good in your lungs. You are safe. You are warm. And the house is breathing right along with you, one slow, steady breath at a time. You remain standing near the great wooden post, looking up at the thin blue river of smoke. It is fascinating to watch how the air moves in this large space. Even though there is a fire burning right in the middle of the room, you notice that the smoke does not spread out and fill the air where you are standing. It stays in a very neat, straight line, rising like a ghost toward the roof. This is because of the way the Vikings shaped the inside of the house. They used the movement of air or the breeze to act like an invisible wall. In the modern world, we call this laminar flow, but to the Vikings, it was just the way a good house should work. They knew that if they kept the long walls slightly curved like the sides of a ship, it would change how the air inside moves. When the heat from the hearth rises, it pulls cooler air from the edges of the room toward the center. This creates a gentle circular breeze that you can barely feel on your skin. This breeze pushes the smoke inward, keeping it away from the benches and the beds where people spend their time. You hold up your hand, palm open, about a meter away from the fire. You can feel a very light, cool tickle of air moving past your fingers toward the flames. It is not a cold draft that makes you shiver. It is a soft, steady movement. It feels like someone is very gently blowing on your hand. This moving air is the cleaner of the house. It makes sure that the oxygen, the good air we need to breathe, is always being pushed toward the people, while the old air and smoke are tucked away in the center of the room. Beside the post, you see a small tool resting on a peg. It is a bellows made of 2 flat pieces of wood and a bag of soft deer leather. A bellows is a tool you squeeze to puff air into a fire to make it grow. You pick it up. The leather is smooth and oily to the touch. It has been used many times to wake up the fire in the morning. You give it a tiny squeeze, and a small whoosh of air comes out of the iron nozzle. In this quiet house, even that small sound seems loud. You put it back carefully, knowing that tonight the house's own natural breeze is doing the work for you. The historical fact here is that this air movement was part of a thermal zone design. The Vikings didn't try to heat the whole giant building to the same temperature. That would be impossible and a waste of wood. Instead, they used the air to create layers. Near the fire, it is very hot. A few steps away, where the benches are, it is a comfortable warmth. Near the walls, it is cooler, which is perfect for storing things that shouldn't get too warm. The breeze keeps these zones exactly where they belong. You take a moment of reflection. You watch a single spark fly up from the embers. It hitches a ride on that invisible breeze and spirals upward, staying perfectly within the column of smoke. It looks like a tiny gold star being carried to heaven. It is a very peaceful thing to watch. You realize that even the air in this house is organized. Nothing is messy. Nothing is left to chance. The survival machine is even controlling the things you cannot see, like the wind and the breath of the room. This makes you feel very safe. You know that as long as the fire is burning and the house is standing, you will have fresh air to breathe. You don't have to worry about the smoke or the smell. The house is constantly cleaning itself, using nothing but the physics of heat and the shape of the wood. You lean your head against the cool wood of the post and close your eyes. You can hear the very faint hiss of the air being drawn into the fire. It is a rhythmic, soothing sound like the sound of the ocean a long way off. You think about how loud and clunky our modern fans and air conditioners are. They hum and rattle and break down. But this system is silent. It has no moving parts. It cannot break. It just works, day after day, century after century. It is a masterpiece of understanding how the world works. The Vikings didn't just live in nature. They invited nature inside and gave it a job to do. They made the wind their servant. You pull your woolen cloak a bit tighter. The air near your face is fresh and crisp, but the heat from the thermal battery stones is still warming your legs. It is the perfect balance. You are right in the middle of the best zone in the house. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for the builders who knew how to curve a wall and place a vent. They made it possible for you to sit here in the dark, next to a fire, and still breathe air as clean as a mountaintop. The Longhouse is a very clever place. It uses the cold to get tight, the stones to hold the heat, and the breeze to stay clean. You are the guest of a very smart people. You stay there, listening to the soft hush of the air, feeling the light touch of the breeze on your skin, and watching the smoke dance its slow, private dance toward the stars. You walk further down the long hall, away from the bright golden eye of the fire. As you move into the shadows, the air becomes slightly cooler, and the smell changes. The scent of pine and meadowsweet is still there, but now it is mixed with the warm, heavy smell of hay and the sweet, musky scent of living creatures. You have reached the end of the Longhouse where the animals stay. In the Viking world, the house was a home for everyone, people and beasts alike. You stop and stand very still in the dark. At first you hear nothing but the wind outside. Then you hear a soft rhythmic sound. Huff, 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 huff. It is the sound of a large cow breathing as she sleeps. Then comes a small, wet noise of a sheep smacking its lips, and the rustle of dry straw as a goat moves its head. These are the sounds of the barn end of the house. You are not alone in the night shift. You are surrounded by the gentle company of the animals that help the family survive. The historical fact is that having animals inside the house was another clever trick of the survival machine. Large animals, like cows and oxen, are like big, furry heaters. Their bodies stay very warm, and that heat escapes into the room. By keeping the cows at one end of the building, the Vikings added even more warmth to the air. The animals acted as living thermal batteries that never ran out of power as long as they were fed. This helped keep the interior temperature 40 to 50 degrees warmer than the freezing world outside. You reach out into the dark and feel the rough, wooden slats of a stall. A stall is a small, walled-off space for a single animal. You feel a soft, velvety nose press against your palm. It is one of the cows. Her breath is hot and smells of dried grass. You gently stroke the bridge of her nose. Her skin is thick and warm. You can feel the life pulsing underneath. In this quiet moment of reflection, you realize how much the people and the animals depend on each other. The people provide the warm house and the hay, and the animals provide the extra heat and the milk that keeps the children strong. Near the stall, you see a specific tool hanging on a hook. It is a milking stool with only 3 legs, carved from a single piece of birchwood. Beside it sits a large wooden bucket held together with iron hoops. You touch the rim of the bucket. It is smooth from years of being carried back and forth. This is a microhistory of the daily work that happens here. Even in the middle of the winter night, the animals need care. A farmer might get up in the dark just to check that the water isn't frozen, or to give a nervous sheep a handful of extra grain. The animals are very quiet. They know it is the time for resting. The darkness of the Longhouse is a heavy blanket that makes everyone feel sleepy and safe. You hear the cow settle back down into the straw with a long, contented sigh. The straw crinkles like dry paper under her weight. You stay there for a moment, just listening to the chorus of breathing. It is a very peaceful sound. It reminds you that the night shift is not a lonely time. The whole house is a community of living things, all huddling together against the frost. You think about how different this is from a modern farm. Today, animals are often kept far away in cold metal buildings. But here, they are part of the family. Their warmth is a gift, and their sounds are the heartbeat of the home. You feel a deep sense of calm standing here in the dark. The smell of the hay is sweet and earthy. It reminds you of the summer fields, now buried deep under the snow. Even though it is winter, the life of the field is still here, tucked away in the stalls. You turn to walk back toward the fire. As you move away, you feel the air get warmer again. The heat from the cows stays at their end, and the heat from the hearth stays at their end, and the heat from the hearth stays in the middle. The house is a map of different temperatures, and you know exactly where you are by how the air feels on your skin. You take one last look back into the shadows. You can see the faint reflection of the distant fire in the large, dark eye of a sheep. It watches you for a second before closing its lids and drifting back to sleep. You feel very safe. The survival machine is full of life. The trees, the stones, the people, and the beasts are all working together to stay warm. You are the watcher of this big, breathing family. You walk softly so you do not wake them. The floor is firm under your boots, and the silence is kind. You are learning that the secret to surviving the winter is not just about building strong walls. It is about keeping life close to you. The long night continues. The wind screams at the roof, but inside, the cow breathes, The straw rustles and the warmth remains. You are part of a very old and very wise way of living. You feel a deep peace as you head back toward the orange glow of the heart of the house, leaving the animals to their warm, hay-scented dreams. You move back toward the center of the long hall, but you stop just before you reach the big fire pit. To one side of the hearth, there's a special area where the ground feels very steady, and the air is thick with a different kind of scent. It is sharp and tangy, a bit like the smell of a fresh lemon, mixed with the creaminess of butter. This is the food corner. In a world without fridges or shops, the Vikings had to be very clever about how they kept their food from spoiling. They used the different thermal zones of the house to act as their kitchen and their pantry. Right here, near the edge of the warm stones but not directly in the heat, is where the fermentation happens. Fermentation is a big word, but it just means letting food change in a safe way so it lasts longer. You see a row of large, round jars made of thick clay. They are tucked into the earth to keep them steady. You lean down and touch the side of one jar. The clay feels cool but not cold. It is the perfect temperature for making skyer. Skyer is a very thick, creamy kind of yogurt that the Vikings loved. It is sour and filling, and it can stay good for a long time if it is kept in the right spot. The historical fact is that the Longhouse was a masterpiece of integrated climate control. The Vikings didn't just throw their food anywhere. They knew that certain foods, like milk and cream, needed a gentle warmth to turn into cheese or skyer. By placing these jars in this specific warm zone near the hearth, they used the natural heat of the thermal battery stones to do the work that a modern yogurt maker does today. It used 75% less fuel than if they had to heat a separate room. The house did the work for them, just by being the right shape. You look closer at one of the jars. It has a heavy wooden lid held down by a smooth river stone. Beside the jars, you see a specific tool, a butter worker. This is a flat wooden board with a handle and a series of deep grooves carved into it. It is used to press the extra water out of freshly churned butter so the butter stays fresh and doesn't go rancid. You can see a few yellow smears of fat still caught in the grain of the wood. This is a micro-history of the night shift work. While the sun is away, the cream is turning into butter and the milk is turning into skyer. The house is busy making food, even while the people sleep. The room is very quiet here. You take a moment of reflection. You listen to a very faint, tiny sound coming from one of the jars. Pop, bubble. It is the sound of the food changing. It is a very small living sound. It reminds you that even though the garden is buried under 3 feet of snow outside, life is still happening in these clay pots. The bacteria are working. The milk is thickening. The house is providing the warmth they need to grow. It makes you feel very peaceful to know that tomorrow morning there will be fresh, sour skyer for the children to eat. All because the house was built with this warm corner. You reach out and touch the wooden lid of a smaller jar. This one contains honey. Because it sits near the warmth, the honey stays soft and runny. If it were in the cold end of the house, it would turn into a hard, sugary block. The Vikings knew this. They knew exactly where to put every bowl and every basket. They treated the heat of the fire like a precious ingredient, mixing it into their food to keep it alive. It is a very smart way to live. They didn't have to fight nature. They just learned where the warm air moved and used it to their advantage. You stand up and look at the shadows dancing on the wall behind the jars. The air here is heavy and smells of cream and honey. It is a very comforting smell. It makes you think of home and safety. Even though you are in a giant building made of logs and dirt, it feels very sophisticated. Everything has its place. Everything is being taken care of. You feel like a guest in a very well-run machine. The survival machine isn't just about keeping you from freezing. It's about making sure you have something good to eat when you wake up. You walk back toward the main fire, leaving the quiet, bubbling jars in their warm corner. You feel a sense of satisfaction. You have seen the logs that hold out the wind, the stones that hold the heat, and now the jars that hold the life of the farm. The night shift is a busy time for the house, even if the people are still. You take a deep breath, tasting the sweetness of the honey in the air. You are safe, you are warm, and you are well fed. The Longhouse is doing its job, and the morning feels like a promise that will surely be kept. You move away from the golden warmth of the hearth and the sweet-smelling fermentation corner. You walk toward the very end of the Longhouse, opposite where the animals are kept. As you walk, you feel the air change. The gentle, humid warmth of the main hall fades away, replaced by a crisp, sharp chill. This is the cold storage room. It is a thermal zone designed to be as cold as possible without letting the food freeze into solid blocks of ice. The historical fact is that the Vikings were masters of passive thermal management. They built this part of the Longhouse with extra thick layers of turf and stone on the outside, but they did not run the underfloor heating pipes this far. This created a natural refrigerator. While the main hall is a cozy 20 degrees, this room stays at a steady 4 or 5 degrees. It is the perfect place to keep meat, fish, and berries through the winter. By using 75% less fuel than other medieval buildings, they could still keep a large area cold just by where they put the walls. You step into the room, and your breath hitches for a second. The air is very dry here. You can see your breath again, forming tiny silver puffs in the dim light of your small stone lamp. The walls here are lined with heavy wooden shelves. Hanging from the rafters are long strings of dried fish, mostly cod, which have been dried in the cold sea air until they are as hard as wood. This is stockfish. It is a micro-history of Viking survival. This fish can last for years without going bad. To eat it, you have to beat it with a hammer to soften it up and then soak it in water. Beside the fish, you see large wooden barrels. You move closer and lift the lid of one. Inside, you see layers of dark red meat packed in thick white salt. This is salted beef and pork. The salt pulls the water out of the meat so that bacteria cannot grow. You can smell the sharp mineral scent of the salt mixed with the heavy iron smell of the meat. You touch a piece of the beef. It feels very firm and cold. This is the family's energy bank. This meat will give the workers the strength they need to chop wood and clear snow when the sun finally returns. The room is incredibly silent. Away from the crackle of the fire and the breathing of the cows, the silence feels like a physical thing. You stop and reflect on the stillness. In the modern world, we have loud humming refrigerators that use a lot of electricity. But here, the fridge is just a part of the house. It uses the coldness of the earth and the thickness of the walls to do the same job. It is a very peaceful way to store food. There is no waste, no noise, and no broken parts. It just stays cold because that is how it was built. You see a smaller basket tucked into a corner. It is filled with dried crowberries and lingonberries. These tiny tart fruits were gathered in the autumn and dried to keep their vitamins. The Vikings knew that even if they had plenty of meat, they needed these little berries to keep their bodies healthy. You pick up a single dried lingonberry. It is wrinkled and dark, like a tiny purple raisin. You put it on your tongue. It is very sour and makes your mouth tingle, but it tastes like the wild forest. You look around the chilly room. Everything is organized. The heavy barrels are on the bottom, the hanging fish are in the middle, and the light baskets of herbs and berries are on the high shelves. It is a library of food. You feel a sense of security, knowing that even if a great storm lasted for weeks, the people inside this survival machine would not go hungry. The house is holding on to the summer's harvest, keeping it fresh and safe in this quiet, cold pocket. Your fingers are starting to feel a bit numb from the cold air, so you decide it is time to head back toward the light. You replace the lid on the salt barrel and turn away. As you step back into the main hall, the warmth hits you like a soft wave. It feels wonderful to have the heat return to your face. You realize that the Longhouse is like a series of different worlds all under one roof. You have the world of fire, the world of animals, the world of food, and the world of the cold. You walk back toward the hearth, your boots making a soft thud on the hard dirt. You feel very grateful for the cleverness of the builders. They knew that life needs both heat and cold to survive. They built a house that could provide both at the same time. You take a deep breath of the pine-scented air in the main hall. You are safe, and the larder is full. The night shift is easy when you know that everything you need is just a few steps away in the dark. You walk back to the center of the Longhouse, where the air is thick with the comforting warmth of the thermal battery stones. Your body feels heavy now, the long hours of the night shift finally pulling at your muscles. You move toward one of the sleeping platforms that line the walls. These platforms are raised off the ground, built into the very frame of the house. Being off the floor keeps you away from any stray drafts and places you right in that sweet thermal zone where the warm air lingers before rising to the rafters. You reach down and touch the bedding. It is a thick, shaggy pile of woolen blankets and animal skins. You pick up a cloak made of wadmal, that heavy, water-resistant wool you felt earlier. It is incredibly dense. The Vikings spent hundreds of hours spinning and weaving this cloth on upright looms. After it was woven, they would full the cloth by soaking it and beating it until the fibers locked together. This made a fabric that was almost like felted armor against the cold. It doesn't just sit on you, it presses down with a reassuring weight. The historical fact is that the Longhouse was designed with thermal zones, not just for food, but for sleep. By placing the beds along the walls and raising them up, the builders ensured that the people stayed in the warmest part of the room. The heat from the subfloor pipes and the central hearth rises and pools right where you lie. Because the walls are 2 meters thick with earth and resin-rich logs, the temperature here stays steady all night long. You don't need a roaring fire to stay warm. You just need the house to be itself. Beside your bed, you see a specific microhistory detail, a small bone comb inside a leather pouch. It is carved from reindeer antler with fine teeth and beautiful patterns of circles and lines. Even in the middle of winter, the Vikings were very clean people. Before lying down, you might run this comb through your hair to remove any dust or bits of hay. It feels smooth and cool against your scalp. This little tool shows that even in a survival machine, there was room for beauty and personal care. It makes the house feel less like a fortress and more like a home. You sit on the edge of the platform and pull a heavy sheepskin over your lap. The wool is long and curly, smelling faintly of the lanolin, the natural oil that keeps the sheep dry in the rain. You lean back against the wall. The log behind you is solid and silent. You take a moment of reflection. You listen to the house. The wind is still there, a distant ghost of a sound. But in here, everything is still. You feel the weight of the wool and the warmth of the room wrapping around you. You are perfectly safe. In the modern world, we often feel like we are fighting the winter. We turn up the thermostat and hide behind thin walls of glass and brick. But here, you are part of the winter. You are tucked inside a shell of earth and wood that was grown specifically to handle this cold. You don't feel like you are hiding. You feel like you are thriving. The survival machine is doing all the work, holding the heat in its stones and its moss-lined joints, allowing you to simply exist in peace. You pull the Whatmore cloak up to your chin. The wool is a bit scratchy, but it is a good scratchy. It makes you feel the warmth even more. You look out at the hearth. The orange glow is lower now, but the stones are still pulsing with that deep, stored energy. You realize that you don't have to keep the watch anymore. The house is the watchman. The trees that were seasoned in the ice, the floors that were packed with heat, and the roof that breathes for you are all on duty. You let your eyes drift shut for a second. The smell of pine, smoke, and wool is like a lullaby. You feel the heavy, comforting pressure of the blankets. Your toes are warm, your skin is relaxed, and the air you breathe is fresh and clean. You are the heart of the home, protected by layers of ancient wisdom and clever engineering. The night shift is moving toward its end, and you are exactly where you are meant to be. The Longhouse stays quiet. The animals in the far end are still. The jars in the warm corner are bubbling softly, and you, wrapped in your heavy wool, are beginning to drift into a deep, safe sleep. You are learning that true comfort isn't about high-energy technology. It's about a deep understanding of the world around you. You are warm because the Vikings knew how to listen to the forest. You stay there, sinking into the soft sheepskin, feeling the solid strength of the survival machine all around you. You do not go to sleep just yet. You sit back up on the edge of the wooden platform and look toward the hearth. As the watcher of the night, you have one more small job to do. You must tend the fire. In this house, you do not want a big, roaring fire at this time of night. A big fire uses up too much wood and makes the room too hot for sleeping. Instead, you want a slow fire. This is a fire that burns quietly, like a small orange heart beating in the dark. You walk softly across the warm dirt floor to the stone pit. The embers are a very deep, glowing red, covered in a thin skin of grey ash. You reach for a small pile of wood sitting near the hearth. This wood is different from the big logs used in the walls. These are branch wood pieces about as thick as your wrist. You pick up a piece of birch. Birch is a wonderful wood because it has a papery bark that catches fire very easily, even if there is only a tiny bit of heat left in the coals. You use a small iron tool, a fire shovel, to move the ash aside. This tool has a long handle and a flat, square blade. It feels heavy and cold in your hand until you move it near the heat. You gently scrape away the grey powder to reveal the bright orange glow beneath. This is a microhistory of the night shift. The ash acts like a blanket for the fire. It stops the air from getting to the coals so they burn very, very slowly. By uncovering them, you are giving the fire a little bit of breath, so it can wake up just enough to catch the new wood. The historical fact is that the Vikings were very careful with their fuel. Even though they lived in a land full of trees, they did not waste a single stick, because the Longhouse was so good at holding heat using 75% less fuel than other buildings. They only needed a few small pieces of wood to keep the thermal battery stones warm all night. They were the masters of saving energy. They knew that the best fire is not the biggest one, but the one that lasts the longest. You place 2 pieces of birch on the glowing coals. You don't toss them in. You lay them carefully in a V shape. This allows the air to move between them. You stay very still and watch. For a minute, nothing happens. Then, a tiny curl of white smoke rises from the birch bark. A second later, a small blue flame licks the side of the wood. It grows into a steady yellow light. The fire is awake again, but it is calm. It is a peaceful, quiet flame that doesn't pop or crackle. You take a moment of reflection. You sit on your heels and watch the light. The way the fire moves is very relaxing. It is like watching water flow in a river. The shadows on the walls grow and shrink with the flame. You feel the heat on your face, a gentle pressure that makes your skin feel soft. You realize that this small fire is the reason the whole survival machine works. It is the spark that keeps the logs tight, the floor warm, and the air moving. Such a small thing can protect so many people from the giant cold night outside. You think about the wood itself. This birch tree grew in the sun, drinking up the light for many years. Now, in the dark of winter, it is giving that light back to you. It is a beautiful cycle. You are not just burning wood, you are releasing stored sunshine. This makes the night shift feel less like a fight against the dark, and more like a celebration of the light. You feel a deep connection to the forest and the seasons. The room is so quiet, you can hear the tiny hiss of the sap inside the birch branch. It sounds like a secret being whispered. You feel very proud to be the one watching over it. You are the one making sure the family wakes up to a warm house. You are the one who knows how to talk to the fire. You put the iron shovel back in its place. The metal makes a soft clink against the stone. You walk back to your bed, but you look over your shoulder one last time. The fire is perfect. It is small, steady, and warm. The orange light reflects off the resin-rich logs, making the whole room look like it is made of gold. You feel a deep sense of peace. The house is safe. The battery is charging. The watch is going well. You sink back into your woolen blankets, feeling the weight of the wadmal and the warmth of the room. The long night continues, but the heart of the home is beating strong. You lie back on the sleeping platform, your head resting on a soft pillow filled with duck feathers. From this position, you have a perfect view of one of the massive wooden posts that holds up the high roof. This post is not smooth like the logs in the wall. It is covered from bottom to top with beautiful swirling shapes. You reach out a hand and trace the lines of your fingers. The wood is cool and feels like polished bone. These are carvings, and they tell the stories of the people who built this survival machine. The Vikings did not have many books made of paper. Instead, they wrote their stories on the things they used every day. They carved into their ships, their boxes, and the very bones of their houses. You see a pattern of 2 great snakes twisting around each other. Their bodies are long and thin, and they bite each other's tails. This is a common pattern in Viking art. It represents the idea that everything in the world is connected, like a big circle that never ends. It reminds you that the house, the trees, and the people are all part of one big story. The historical fact is that these carvings served a purpose beyond looking pretty. By carving patterns into the wood, the builders increased the surface area of the post. This allowed the wood to grip the thermal layers of the air more effectively. It also helped the smoke from the hearth move more smoothly up toward the roof. Every little notch and curve in the wood changed how the air behaved. The Vikings were so good at engineering that even their art had a job to do. You look closely at a small detail near the bottom of the post. It is a tiny carving of a man holding a hammer. This is a micro-history of the tools used to make this home. Beside him is a skep. This is a basket made of twisted straw, used for keeping bees or carrying grain. It is a simple reminder of the work that happens in the summer sun. Seeing these shapes in the middle of the winter makes the house feel more alive. It is like the wood is holding on to the memories of the warm months for you. The room is very still. You take a moment of reflection. You look at the way the light from the small fire moves over the carvings. One moment, the snakes look like they are dancing. The next moment, they are still and quiet. It is a very peaceful thing to watch. You feel like the house is talking to you in a secret language. It is telling you that you are not the first person to sit here in the dark. Many people have watched these same shadows move across these same carvings. You are part of a very long line of watchers. You think about the man who carved this. He probably sat right where you are sitting, using a small, sharp iron knife. He worked slowly, taking his time to make sure every line was perfect. He knew that this post would stand here for hundreds of years. He wanted to leave something behind that would make the house feel special. You feel a deep respect for his patience. In the modern world, we make things so fast that we often forget to make them beautiful. But here, beauty and survival go hand in hand. The wood of the post feels very strong. It has to be, because it is carrying the weight of the thick turf roof and all the snow piled on top of it. But because of the carvings, the post doesn't look heavy or scary. It looks light and elegant. It is a masterpiece of balance. The Vikings knew how to make something that was as strong as a mountain but as pretty as a piece of jewelry. You let your hand drop back onto the woolen blanket. The carvings are still there, watching over the room. You feel safe and looked after. The survival machine is not just a cold box of engineering. It is a place of art and spirit. You close your eyes and imagine the man with his knife, the wood shavings falling onto the dirt floor like snow. You are learning that a home is more than just walls and a roof. It is the stories we tell and the marks we leave behind. The Longhouse remains quiet. The orange light of the fire is soft and kind. You stay there, the patterns of the wood still dancing in your mind, feeling the history of the house surrounding you like a warm embrace. You are part of the story now, a quiet watcher in the deep of the night. You lie very still, listening. For a moment, the house is so quiet that you can hear the tiny rhythmic tick-tick of a wood-boring beetle deep inside a beam. But then, a new sound rises from outside. It starts as a low, deep moan, like a giant horn blowing in the distance. It grows louder and higher until it becomes a sharp, whistling scream. This is the wind. It has come down from the high, icy mountains, gathering speed across the frozen fjords. Now, it has found the Longhouse, and it is hitting the building with all its strength. You feel a tiny vibration in the wooden platform beneath you as a massive gust slams into the side of the house. But the house does not shake. It does not groan or creak like a modern building might. It feels as solid as a cliff. This is because the Vikings designed the survival machine to work with the wind, not against it. The long curved shape of the walls acts like the hull of a ship. Instead of the wind hitting a flat surface and pushing it over, the air slides smoothly around the rounded sides. The wind wants to grab the house and pull it apart, but it can't find a grip. The historical fact is that while traditional stone buildings of the 13th century often collapsed or became iceboxes during brutal winters, these timber longhouses thrived. Stone gets very cold and holds that cold, but the engineered timber and the layers of turf on the roof create a passive thermal management system. The wind actually helps. As the cold air rushes over the curved roof, it creates a small area of low pressure. This helps the autonomous ventilation vents we saw earlier to pull the old, smoky air out of the house even faster. The storm is literally helping you breathe better. You reach into a small leather pouch tied to the post near your head. You pull out a whetstone. This is a long, thin piece of smooth grey slate used for sharpening knives. It feels cold and heavy in your palm. In the middle of the night, when the wind is howling, a person might sit and slowly rub their small utility knife, called a sea axe, against this stone. Shh, clink, shh, clink. The sound of the stone against the metal is very steady and calming. It is a micro-history of the night shift. It is a small job that keeps your hands busy while you listen to the storm. You take a moment of reflection. You listen to the sound of the snow. It is not falling softly anymore. The wind is throwing it against the roof like handfuls of sand. Scritch, scritch, scritch. You think about the world outside. It is a white chaos of ice and air where no human could survive for long. But here, just a few feet away, you are in a different world. You are warm. You are dry. You can smell the sweet pine and the fading scent of the hearth. The contrast between the wild storm and the quiet house makes you feel incredibly lucky. You look up at the rafters. They are made of heavy oak, held together with wooden pegs called tree nails. These nails are better than iron ones because they are made of the same material as the beams. When the weather changes and the wood moves, the nails move with it. They don't rust or snap, they just hold. You feel the immense weight of the turf roof above you. It must weigh many tons, especially with the extra snow on top. But that weight is a good thing. It presses the logs together even tighter, making the survival machine more efficient the harder the storm blows. In the modern world, a storm like this might make us worry. We might think about the power going out or the roof leaking. But here, there is nothing to go out. The fire is in the stones. The heat is in the floor. The strength is in the wood. You realize that the Vikings didn't build these houses because they were primitive. They built them because they were the most advanced way to stay alive in a place that wants to freeze you. They were engineers of the environment. The wind gives one last, massive roar, shaking the heavy door in its frame. But then it begins to fade. The screen turns back into a moan, and then into a low hum. The storm is moving on, heading toward the sea. The house has won. It didn't move an inch. You feel a deep sense of pride in the building. It has protected you. It has kept the night shifts safe. You run your thumb over the smooth surface of the wet stone one last time before putting it back in its pouch. You let your head sink deeper into the feather pillow. The air is still and warm. The silence returns, deeper than before. You feel the thermal zones working perfectly. The warmth from the subfloor heating is rising around your legs, and the fresh air from the roof vents is cool on your forehead. You are a passenger on a great wooden ship that is sailing through the winter night, and you are tucked safely in your cabin. The Longhouse is a masterpiece of peace. You listen to the silence and feel the history of the walls. They have stood through 1,000 storms just like this one, and they will stand through 1,000 more. You close your eyes, letting the fading hum of the wind lull you toward a deeper rest. You are safe. You are warm. The survival machine is on watch. The storm has passed, leaving the world outside even more silent than before. The air inside the Longhouse has settled into a comfortable, heavy stillness. You feel a little bit hungry, a gentle hollow in your stomach that tells you it is time for a midnight snack. In this world, food is not just about being full. It is about keeping your internal fire burning so your body can stay warm. You sit up, the woolen blanket sliding off your shoulders, and walk toward the hearth one more time. Sitting on a flat, warm stone near the edge of the embers is a small wooden bowl. It has been sitting there all night, kept warm by the thermal battery of the hearthstones. Inside is a thick, grey-brown porridge made of cracked barley and oats. You pick up the bowl. The wood is warm to the touch, and the weight of the porridge feels good in your hands. This is granta, the simple, hearty meal that has fed people in the north for 1,000 years. It is full of energy that releases slowly, perfect for the long hours of the night shift. You reach for a specific microhistory detail. A small horn spoon. It is made from the translucent, yellow-brown horn of an ox. The horn has been heated and pressed until it is flat and smooth. It feels very light, almost like plastic, but it is much stronger. You dip the spoon into the porridge. You can see the tiny grains of barley that have soaked up the water and the heat until they are soft and sweet. You take a bite. It tastes of the earth, of the salt from the sea, and of the light honey that was stirred in earlier. The historical fact is that this simple meal was a key part of the survival machine. To stay warm in a house that is 40 degrees warmer than the outside air, your body needs fuel. Barley and oats are excellent because they take a long time to digest. They keep your metabolism the way your body turns food into heat working steadily while you sleep. By keeping the bowl on the warm hearthstones, the Vikings made sure that even in the middle of the night, a person could have a hot meal without having to start a new fire. It was a 24-hour kitchen that used zero extra fuel. You sit on the edge of the stone hearth, moving your feet a little closer to the warmth. You take a moment of reflection. The only sound is the soft clink of your horn spoon against the wooden bowl. You look at the porridge and think about the fields where the grain grew. Those fields are now deep under the snow, resting and waiting for the spring. But here, in your bowl, that summer energy is alive. It is a very peaceful thought. You are eating the sunshine of the past to help you survive the cold of the present. The light from the embers is very low now, just a soft pulse of deep red. It makes the porridge look like molten gold. You feel the warmth of the food spreading from your stomach to your chest, and then out to your fingers and toes. It is a very physical kind of comfort. In the modern world, we often eat quickly and don't think about it. But here, every bite feels important. Every bite is a gift from the survival machine. You are part of the cycle of the house. The fire warms the stones warm the food, and the food warms you. You finish the last of the porridge, and use the spoon to scrape the sides of the bowl. You don't want to waste a single grain. Waste is not a word people know in this house. Everything is used and everything is respected. You set the bowl down on the stone and lean back. You feel very satisfied. The night shift can be a lonely time, but with a warm belly and a quiet fire, it feels like a secret holiday. You're the only one who knows how good this porridge tastes in the middle of a frozen night. You look around the room. The shadows are long and soft. The resin-rich walls are dark and solid. The air is sweet with the scent of the fire and the drying herbs. You feel a deep sense of belonging. You are not just a guest. You are a part of the house. You are the one who eats its food and watches its fire. You take a deep, slow breath. The air is perfect. The warmth is steady. You are ready to return to your bed, but you stay for just a moment longer, enjoying the heavy, warm silence of the Longhouse. The survival machine is working perfectly. The grain has been turned into heat, the wood into light, and the cold into a reason to stay close together. You feel a deep gratitude for the simple things: a wooden bowl, a horn spoon, and a warm stone. They are the true treasures of the Viking world. You stand up slowly, your body feeling heavy and content, and begin the short walk back to your woolen blankets. You lie back down, but your mind is still active, thinking about the massive building that surrounds you. You look at the walls again. You think about the great stone castles you've seen in pictures, the ones with cold grey walls and tiny windows. You might think a stone castle would be the strongest place to stay in a winter like this. But the truth is very different. In the middle of a Viking winter, a stone building can become a trap. Stone is a thief of heat. It pulls the warmth out of the air and holds it deep inside, staying cold to the touch for a very long time. The historical fact is that while stone fortifications often proved fatal during the brutal winters of the early 13th century, Viking timber structures thrived. This is because of the material science of wood. Wood is filled with millions of tiny pockets of air. These air pockets act like a million little blankets, stopping the heat from escaping. When the temperature drops, the cellular structure of the resin-rich pine actually contracts, creating a tighter seal. Stone cannot do this. Stone just stays cold, and when it gets too cold, it can even crack. But this wooden survival machine gets better as the night gets harder. You reach out and touch the log next to your bed. It feels warm, almost like it has its own heartbeat. Beside your hand, you see a small tool tucked into a gap in the wood. It is an awl. An awl is a sharp, pointed spike made of iron with a wooden handle. It is used for punching holes in thick leather so you can sew it. You pick it up and feel the point. It is very sharp. This is a micro-history of how the house was maintained. If a gap did appear in the wood, or if a piece of leather needed to be fixed to the door to stop a draft, this awl was the tool for the job. It is a small, simple thing, but it kept the house tight and the people safe. You take a moment of reflection. You listen to the house. It is so much quieter than a stone building. Stone reflects sound, making every footstep echo and ring, but wood swallows sound. It makes the room feel soft and private. You feel like you are wrapped in a giant wooden cocoon. The thick walls of earth and timber are not just keeping out the wind, they are keeping out the noise of the world. You feel a deep sense of peace. You are in a place that was designed to be gentle on your senses. You think about the people in the south who built with stone. They had to burn huge amounts of wood in giant fireplaces just to stay warm, and even then, their backs would be cold while their faces were hot. But in this survival machine, the heat is everywhere. It is in the floor, in the stones, and in the very walls. Because wood is such a good insulator, a word for something that traps heat, the house stays warm, using 75% less fuel. It is a much smarter way to live. The Vikings didn't try to overpower the winter with a giant fire. They used the cleverness of the trees to hold the winter at bay. You look up at the roof. The heavy turf and the snow are pressing down, and the wooden beams are holding them up with ease. Wood is flexible. It can bend a little bit under the weight without breaking. Stone is brittle. If it moves too much, it snaps. You feel very safe under this flexible, breathing roof. You realize that the primitive Vikings were actually much more advanced than the people who came after them. They understood the local materials, the pine, the moss, and the turf, and they used them to create a perfect environment. You let the awl rest back in its place. Your fingers are warm and your heart is steady. You are learning that the most advanced solution is often the simplest one. You don't need high-energy technology when you have a deep understanding of how a tree grows and how heat moves through a stone. You are a witness to 1,000 years of wisdom, all contained in the smell of the pine and the warmth of the air. The Longhouse remains a sanctuary. A night shift is a time of quiet learning. You feel the history of the wood against your back and the protection of the earth all around you. You are warm, you are safe, and you are starting to feel the very first hint of tiredness that leads to a deep, dreamless sleep. The survival machine has proven itself once again. Wood is the king of the winter, and you are resting in its palace. You lie still on your raised bed, watching the very top of the room. The air here in the middle of the longhouse is different from any air you have felt before. It is not moving. In most houses, you can feel a little bit of a draft near the floor, or a swirl of wind near the windows. But here, the air feels thick and heavy, like a warm pool of water. It is perfectly still. This is another secret of the survival machine. By using the curved walls and the thick turf roof, the Vikings created a space where the air stays in layers. The historical fact is that this cozy indoor air stays so warm because of the thermal zones the builders created. Because the house is so long and the walls are so thick, the air doesn't get pushed around by the wind outside. The heat from the thermal battery stones rises slowly and then stops, creating a thick blanket of warmth that hangs right over the sleeping platforms. This still air acts as an extra layer of insulation. It is like the house is wearing a giant invisible sweater made of nothing but warm breath and wood smoke. Beside your bed, on a small wooden peg, hangs a distaff. This is a long wooden stick used for holding wool before it is spun into thread. It is carved from a piece of light birch wood and has a small hook at the top. You reach out and touch it. It is smooth and feels warm from the air in the room. This is a micro-history of the life inside the house. During the long winter nights, the women would sit for hours, their fingers moving quickly to turn the raw wool into thread. The stillness of the air was important for this work. A draft would blow the light wool away. The house provided a perfect, quiet place for making the clothes that kept everyone alive. You take a moment of reflection. You breathe in slowly. The air doesn't feel cold in your throat. It feels soft and sweet. You listen to the silence. It is so quiet that you can hear the very faint sound of a single spark dying in the hearth. This stillness makes you feel very calm. In the modern world, we are always surrounded by the sound of fans, cars, or machines. But here, the silence is total. It feels like the house is holding its breath so that you can rest. You think about how hard it is to keep air still. Usually, heat wants to run away and cold wants to rush in. But the Vikings were so clever with their passive thermal management that they made the air stay exactly where they wanted it. They used the shape of the building to trap the warmth. They knew that if they could keep the air from moving, the people would stay warm even with a very small fire. It is a very smart way to save wood and stay comfortable at the same time. You look at the distaff again. You imagine the wool being pulled and twisted into strong thread. Everything in this house is about making something strong out of something simple. They took trees and made a survival machine. They took wool and made woodsmoke armor. They took a fire and made a thermal battery. And they took the air and made it a warm blanket. You feel very small compared to all this wisdom, but you also feel very protected. You let your arm rest back on the soft sheepskin. The warmth of the room is like a gentle hand pressing down on you. Your body feels light, as if you are floating in the still air. You are not worried about the cold outside. You are not worried about the wind. You are just part of the quiet, warm world inside the logs. The night shift is almost over for your mind as the stillness of the room begins to pull you towards sleep. The longhouse is a masterpiece of quiet. The air remains steady, the wood remains strong, and the thermal zones keep the frost far away. You stay there, breathing the still, pine-scented air, feeling the history of the house in every breath. You are safe. You are warm. The survival machine is resting right along with you, holding the warmth tight in its wooden arms. You lie in the soft darkness, feeling the deep peace of the longhouse. One of the most amazing things about this survival machine is how little it asks from the world. You look toward the hearth, where the tiny blue flames are still dancing on the birch wood you added earlier. In a normal house from the old days, you have to keep adding big logs all night long just to stop the water from freezing in your cup. But not here. The Vikings built a house that saves almost everything it touches. The historical fact is that these longhouses were incredibly efficient. Because of the engineered timber, the thick turf, and the thermal battery stones, the building uses 75% less fuel than other buildings from the same time. While a king in a stone castle would need a mountain of wood to stay warm, the family here only needs a few armfuls of branches. This is passive resilience. It means the house does the work of staying warm all by itself, without needing the people to keep feeding a giant hungry fire. Beside the hearth, you see a small wooden tally stick. It is a thin piece of ash wood with little notches carved into the side. This is a micro-history of how the family kept track of their winter supplies. Each notch might represent a bundle of firewood or a sack of grain. You run your fingernail over the notches. They are smooth and even. By burning less wood, the family ensures that their wood pile stacked high outside under a lean-to roof will last until the very last day of the frost. This house isn't just a shelter. It is a way to make sure there is enough for everyone until the spring. You take a moment of reflection. You listen to the fire. It is a very quiet, polite sound. It doesn't roar or crackle loudly because it doesn't need to. The house is so good at holding onto the heat that a small flame is enough. You feel a deep respect for this kind of saving. In the modern world, we often waste so much we leave the lights on and the heaters running. Nup. Here, every spark is precious. Every bit of resin in the wood and every stone in the floor is working to save energy. It makes the air feel more valuable somehow. You think about the thermal zones again. Because the house saves so much heat, the people don't have to huddle right on top of the fire. You can be all the way over in your bed, near the thick earth walls, and still feel the warmth of the stones. It is a very clever way to live. The Vikings didn't try to fight the winter by making more and more heat. They won the fight by making sure the heat they already had never left. They were the first masters of sustainable living, long before that was even a word. You look at the tally stick again before setting it down. You feel a sense of security. You know that even if the winter lasts longer than usual, the family is safe. The survival machine is so efficient that it makes the world feel big and full of plenty, even when it is frozen solid. You are learning that being advanced isn't about having the biggest machines. It's about knowing how to use the smallest things in the smartest way. The Longhouse remains still and silent. The air is warm, the wood is dry, and the woodpile outside remains mostly full. You take a deep, slow breath, feeling the warmth of the saved heat in your chest. You are safe. You are warm. The night shift is a time of quiet plenty, and the house is the guardian of all your winter treasures. You close your eyes, letting the steady, efficient pulse of the home guide you toward a deeper rest. You lie in the dark, but in your mind, you see the Longhouse in a different way. You imagine the building not as it is now, but as it looks to the people from your own time, the year 2026. This ancient survival machine is so clever that the smartest people in the world are coming to places like the Board Museum in Norway to study it. They don't just look at the logs with their eyes. They use special tools that can see through time and wood. Scientists use something called thermal imaging. Imagine a special camera that doesn't see colors like red or blue, that sees heat. When they point this camera at a Viking longhouse, they see something amazing. While a stone building would look cold and dark, the longhouse glows with a steady, warm light. Even after 1,000 years, the thermal zones and the passive management of the wood still work. The scientists at Uppsala University are amazed to see that these old walls keep the heat inside better than many modern houses made of glass and steel. The historical fact is that these archaeological excavations have revealed that the longhouses were not primitive shelters, but sophisticated machines. By using ground-penetrating radar, researchers found the secret subfloor heating paths you walked on earlier. They realized that the Vikings were using engineering principles centuries ahead of their time. They weren't just lucky to stay warm. They planned every inch of the building to be a fortress against the frost. On a small table near your bed, you see a specific tool that a modern scientist might have left behind. A magnifying glass with a silver handle. You pick it up. It feels very smooth and heavy. If you hold it over the grain of the resin-rich log, you can see the tiny cells that were tightened by the ice water hundreds of years ago. This is a micro-history of the two worlds meeting. The old wood and the new science are coming together to solve a big problem: how to live on the earth without using up all its energy. You take a moment of reflection. You listen to the house. It is funny to think that people who have computers and satellites are coming here to learn from people who only had axes and moss. It makes you feel a deep respect for the ancestors. They didn't need high-energy technology because they had a deep understanding of the environment. They knew that the best solutions are often found in the things right under your feet: the dirt, the trees, and the stones. You think about the future. Scientists are now trying to replicate, which means to copy the way these houses work. They want to build new shelters that are energy independent, meaning they stay warm all by themselves without needing wires or pipes from the outside world. They're looking at the way the Viking roof breathes and the way the thermal battery stones store heat. The night shift of the past is helping the people of the future find a better way to live. You let the magnifying glass rest on the table. You feel a sense of pride. You're resting in a building that is a teacher for the whole world. It is not just a pile of old wood. It is a library of wisdom. You realize that the Vikings were not just warriors. They were the first green architects. They knew how to live with nature instead of fighting it. And here you are, right in the middle of their greatest invention. The Longhouse remains a quiet, glowing sanctuary. The air is still, and the warmth is steady. You take a deep breath, feeling the connection between the old world and the new. You are safe, you are warm, and you are part of a story that is still being written by the scientists of today. You close your eyes, letting the thought of the smart house carry you closer to the morning. You lie in the soft, woolly dark, feeling the history of the house press gently against you. It's a strange and beautiful thought that these ancient tricks, born in the minds of people 1,000 years ago, are now the keys to our future. In the world of 2026, we are searching for ways to live that do not hurt the earth. We want homes that are warm in the winter and cool in the summer, without using huge amounts of electricity. And right here, in the design of the survival machine, we have found the answer. The historical fact is that modern sustainable architects, the people who design green buildings, are now desperately trying to replicate the Viking way. They call it passive resilience. It means building a house that is so smart it takes care of itself. By using local materials like resin-rich timber and earth, we can create shelters that are energy independent. We are learning to build houses that breathe through the roof and store heat in the floor, just like this Longhouse has done for centuries. We are finding that high-energy technology is not always the best way. Sometimes, a deep understanding of the wind and the wood is much more powerful. On the small wooden table next to your bed, you see a small, modern compass made of brass and glass. It is a micro-history of how we find our way. The Vikings had their own ways of finding direction, using the stars and the sunstones, but the compass reminds us that we are always looking for the right path. Today, the path leads back to the forest. We are learning to pick trees as carefully as the Viking builders did. We are learning to use the cold seasoning of the ice to make our wood stronger. We are turning back to the old ways to find a path into a cleaner, quieter future. You take a moment of reflection. You listen to the house one last time. It feels very good to know that the night shift of the past is lighting the way for the people of tomorrow. You feel a deep sense of connection. You are resting in the heart of a survival machine that is not just a relic of history, but a blueprint for the world to come. It makes the darkness feel friendly and the cold feel like a teacher. You are part of a very long chain of human cleverness that stretches from the first axe stroke in the forest to the modern laboratory. You think about the children of the future. Perhaps they will live in houses that feel just like this one, safe, warm, and quiet. They will breathe air that is cleaned by the movement of the breeze and walk on floors that hold the heat of the sun. They will be protected by walls that get tighter when the frost comes. The Vikings knew a secret that we are only just remembering, that nature is not something to be conquered, but something to be understood and invited inside. You let your hand rest on the heavy wadmill cloak. The wool is 1,000 years old in its design, but its warmth is as real as the heat from a modern stove. You feel very peaceful. The survival machine has done its job. It has kept you safe through the storm, fed you from its warm corners, and taught you the wisdom of the trees. You are ready for the morning now. You know that the sun will rise on a world that is learning to be smart again. The Longhouse is a masterpiece of hope. The air is still. The fire is a low red pulse, and the future is being built in the shadows of the past. You stay there, sinking into the soft feathers and the heavy wool, feeling the solid strength of the house all around you. You are safe. You are warm. The night shift is almost at an end, and you are resting in the arms of a masterpiece. The deep, heavy darkness of the Longhouse is starting to change. High up in the rafters, the blue smoke is no longer invisible. It is being caught by a very faint, pale light coming through the roof vents. The night shift is coming to an end. You lie still for a moment, feeling the transition of the world. The air is still warm, and the logs are still tight, but the house knows that the day is coming. You can hear a change in the silence outside. The wind has completely died away, and there is a crisp, frozen stillness that only happens just before the dawn. You sit up and swing your legs off the sleeping platform. The floor is still remarkably warm. The thermal battery of the stone hearth and the subfloor heating pars have held their energy all through the long, dark hours. You walk toward the main door, your boots making a soft, familiar sound on the hard-packed earth. You see the night watchman standing near the hearth. He is a tall man with a beard the color of old iron, wearing a thick tunic of grey wadmal. He gives you a small, tired nod. He has seen the fire through the night, and now his work is done. You reach for the heavy iron ring of the door. As you pull it, the seal of the moss and the wood breaks with a soft, frozen creak. You step outside, and the cold hits you like a physical wall. It is a clean, sharp cold that makes your lungs feel wide and bright. The world is transformed. The storm has left behind a thick, smooth blanket of white that covers everything. The Longhouse looks like a giant, sleeping whale made of snow. The sky in the east is turning a soft, dusty pink, and the stars are finally fading away into the light of the new day. The historical fact is that the bald Longhouse and others like it were the only reason people could live this far north. Without this survival machine, the northern parts of Norway and Sweden would have been empty in the winter. These houses allowed a whole culture to thrive in a place that should have been too cold for humans. You look back at the building. You can see a thin ribbon of blue smoke rising straight up into the still morning air. The house is breathing its first breath of the day. It is a sign of life, a signal to the world that the people inside have made it through another night. Beside the door, you see a specific microhistory detail, a snow shovel carved from a single wide piece of maple wood. It has a long handle and a flat, broad blade that has been worn smooth by years of clearing paths. You pick it up. It is light but very strong. This is the first tool of the morning. Before the animals can be let out or the water can be brought from the well, the snow must be moved. It is a simple, honest job that starts the day. You take a deep breath of the freezing air, feeling the strength in your arms and the warmth still lingering in your clothes from the house. You take a moment of reflection. You look at the sun as it finally peeks over the sharp white edge of the mountains. The light turns the snow into a field of diamonds. You think about the night you just spent. You have seen the secrets of the resin-rich trees, the magic of the frozen lake timber, and the cleverness of the breathing roof. You realize that you are not just a visitor. You are part of a very old way of being human. You know now that we don't need to be afraid of the dark or the cold if we have the wisdom to build things that work with the world. The sun is rising. The light is hitting the carved posts and the thick turf roof. Inside, the children are starting to wake up, and the cows are beginning to low for their morning hay. The survival machine has done its job perfectly. It has carried everyone safely through the night shift and delivered them to the morning. You feel a deep sense of peace and a quiet strength. You are ready for the day because you know the house will be there to catch you when the sun goes down again. Slow the pacing now. The world is waking up, but you are still carrying the quiet of the night in your heart. You feel the weight of your woolen cloak and the solid ground beneath your feet. The Longhouse is a fortress of warmth, a masterpiece of wood and stone that has stood the test of time. You are safe. You are home. The cycle of the seasons continues and you are exactly where you belong in the great story of the North. The sun is rising. The gates are opening. The watch is ended.